So in the first lesson, it's kind of an overview, and there's conversation related to how we have a tendency to think negatively about things, even in conversations. And I've noticed that a lot with clients. So if I ask the client, first of all, they tend to tell me all the problems that they're having, and all that's usually phrased pretty negatively. But then when I say, well, what is it that you want? They'll tend to go, well, I don't want to smoke anymore, or I don't want to keep getting stressed out, or I don't want to keep having sleep problems. So even when I would ask them to tell me what they'd want, they would phrase even that in a negative. And then when I would say, okay, so I need you to actually phrase that in a more positive way, like what is it that you really want? So if you're painting a picture, what would that picture look like? And so then the next thing I noticed is that people would just go just stumped, like they really, really have a hard time phrasing things in a positive way, and especially visualizing what that would look like. Or even if I say, well, if you were to paint a picture of this perfect scene, what would it look like? Like, just give me the descriptive words, just give me the adjectives. And they can't do it. So it's become part of the homework for a lot of my clients after their first appointment or after their second one to actually brainstorm on that. Like, think about it. Like, it's very easy for them to write down all their problems. They can come up with pages and pages of their problems. If I say, turn it into what you want, what's the solution? What is it, especially if they're coming in and they're paying me, like, what am I helping you to achieve? Where do you want to get to? And I've had them leave and come back and still feel like they were stumped. So to me, that's evidence of how kind of brainwashed we are into thinking negatively, into having conversations that are negative, into phrasing things negatively, and to have that level of a struggle in trying to phrase things in a more positive way, even when it's homework, even when there's hours of time to do it. Again, what does that tell us about how capable we are of doing it in a shorter period of time, like in the moment, like especially under stress or under pressure, or when all hell's breaking loose. Like, if somebody can't think more positively when they have hours to do it, how can they do it under pressure in 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever? So I don't really get into that kind of detail about it, but that's a lot of what, other than being an overview, that first lesson is just to start you out in trying to see how we tend to think in a more negative manner.
So in the context of going out and doing the clay shooting, you're interviewing people and saying, if you're going out there expecting you're going to mess, expecting it's too hard, expecting the gun's going to malfunction, you're not even starting in the frame of mind that's going to overcome something. So that's the foundation for the course.
Yeah. And there's so many different negative things, and they can start a week before, they can start a month before, they can even start a whole year before. Like, I have had a client that had won every other major event but had never won the nationals. So for him, he had already started deciding he's not going to win the nationals, or I'll probably never win the nationals. And then can you imagine, so then he would shoot the nationals, he wouldn't win, then he would build onto that belief system, and he would already start believing a whole 300 and something days prior that he probably won't even be able to do it next year either. And so it can be that far out and even further. But most people, when it comes to competitions or shooting, it's usually like the morning of or the night before or maybe the week of or something like that. But in life, ultimately, that's no different than anything else. Like, you could have a hot date on a Friday and be thinking about it all week long and saying, oh, she's not going to like me, or this, I'm not going to know what to say, or this is going to suck because nobody ever sticks around, and there's all these other things that people do. So it's not just related to competing or shooting, it's related to how we tend to think about things. But prior to a competition or prior to an important shooting event or something, it could be, I always fall apart at the beginning. I always do well, and then I can't keep it going. I've had strong streaks before, but then I can't maintain them, or I fall apart, and then I end up, losing or something like that. Or anytime that I'm in the lead, and I'm in the lead going into, like Sunday, this is more in golf, but I'm going into the lead on Sunday, but then they decide that they put too much pressure on themselves, because then they expect that they could win, and so then they try too hard, and they end up forcing shots and overthinking and being too cautious. So there's like thousands of things that can go through somebody's mind. Could even be who they're squatted with. So if they find out who they're squatted with ahead of time, and maybe they know that person talks a lot, or maybe they know that person tends to tell people what they should and shouldn't do without being asked, or they are super slow, or they have one of the golf carts that has all this music, and then there's music playing the whole day that's too loud, and like there's all different kinds of personalities, and then there's people that either are fine with those different personalities or they're not, and then they can work themselves up about that also. If they if say they're squatted with a top shooter, they can decide ahead of time that they're not good enough, and then they will do things like they might make a plan during the show pair and change that if the top shooter shoots before them and shoots those targets differently, and then they'll start doubting themselves that they don't know, because this other person's better than them and more advanced than them and knows better. So things like that can cause self-doubt also. And so it's all the way from, like I said, days and weeks and months ahead of time and hours ahead of time, but also all those kinds of thoughts can be happening throughout the whole event as well, station to station. Any other questions about that first part? Did you have a question?
Yeah, kind of. It talked a lot about like being in the zone, and how would you describe the zone, and have you been in the zone?
Mm-hmm.
So, how do people get in the zone? How long does it take for people to figure out how to get in the zone?
That's a good question. So there's a ton of experts out there that are really credible that would tell you that you can't create the zone. I 100% disagree with them, and I believe I'm right. So, and I got some years of practice at this point to back that up, but a lot of experts, coaches and instructors and even high-end shooters and athletes of all kinds would say that the zone is just something that happens randomly. It's like a fluke. It's something that they wish they could grasp. They wish it would happen again. When they explain being in the zone, it's everything that I talked about in the course, but I think I've broken it down into like 8 pieces of a puzzle. And one is time seems to fly by. I feel like someone just said that to me today, that time flew by.
It's Harry
Where was
yesterday,
I?
he was coaching them.
Yes, that was Harry yesterday. You remember that?
Yeah.
So time flies by when you tend to be doing something that you really love and you're absorbed into the moment of it, right? So everybody here, I'm pretty sure, can relate to that. Have you ever been like on a date and time just flies by, or you're engaged in a book or art, or even driving down the road, if it's a nice day and you got the music playing, and like all of a sudden you're at your destination, right? So raise your hand if you've had that happen. Like time flew by and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here already or something. So time flies by, that's one of the elements. Another element is that everything seems to disappear around me. So again, if you think about your personal experience when the time flew by, you would likely also say that you weren't really noticing what was happening around you. Like if you were on a date and you looked up, it might be dark already, or the restaurant might be closing down and you're the last table. If you're engrossed in art or painting or something like that, again, you can look up and it's dark all of a sudden, or you can't believe what time it is. And shooting, it's the same thing in any other sport. Next thing you know, they're done with the round. They don't even know don't even know. Like a lot of times they don't know they're even on the last station. They don't know their score. They don't know that there's a crowd of people around them. And that would be ideal, right? So when I worked with the PGA golfers, if they're in the lead, they're going to end up with cameras all around them and live TV and crowds of people watching. If they're in the zone, then that's great, because all that disappears, like they don't pay attention to it. If they're not in the zone, then all those things are cause like pressure, right? Where's Pardue showing up again, and you're the only one that knows. No, you and Harry know what's happening. Thank you. So we've got that everything disappears around you, that time flies by. It feels like it's just you and that thing, right? It could be, it's just me and this other person, and we were, on this date, and everything disappeared around us. In shooting, it's just you and that target, and people will say it felt like the target was like the size of a garbage can lid. It's a very common thing for people that have experienced the zone. So you're absolutely, totally connected to that other thing, and that's part of the everything seems to disappear around you. Shooters will say, it didn't feel like me. Like it just pulled the trigger and the target just broke. Like it just happened. So they don't really, they know it's them. I mean, I don't really want to sound weird or anything. They know it's them, but what that really means is they didn't think about it. They didn't consciously think about it. They didn't analyze it. They didn't wonder, they go, should I pull it? Should I not pull it? Like there was no conscious level thought about pulling the trigger. It was subconscious. So they'll say, it didn't even feel like me, it just happened. Another way to just explain it is they say that they felt like they were shooting instinctively, they'll say intuitively, or they'll say subconsciously. It's one of those three words that they tend to use. So that a lot of that basically means the same thing. So I shoot instinctively means, again, I didn't really think about it, it just happened. That's the same as shooting intuitively, and that's the same as shooting subconsciously. The other thing is that they'll say that they had a really quiet mind. So, and then add some more words to that. What they're really saying is that my conscious mind was quiet. So we could say also we have a peace of mind, right? That's another way of saying it. Or another way is I wasn't analyzing every little thing. I wasn't overanalyzing. I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't over-trying. So instead of phrasing that negatively, the positive is that I had a quiet mind, right? So that's all saying the same thing. If you start to break down what the zone is, then you could go, well, I can say, I know how to teach people to do every single one of those things, and I do that regularly. So if I can teach people to do every one of those things, then why wouldn't I be able to safely say that you can do all of them, and you can do them whenever you want, and if you practice and you understand your mind well enough, and you understand how to create those kinds of states of mind, then you can be in the zone at any time. But it's not just any time, you can be in the zone more time, more and more and more throughout your waking moments. So that doesn't have to be some fluky thing that just kind of happens whenever. It can be something that you practice and you become really deliberate at it, which therefore means that I can do it whenever I want. And then if peace of mind is a really great state, which it is, if the zone is where peak performance occurs, which it is, then why wouldn't you want to do that all the time, right? It wouldn't just be for sport to be in the zone. Like, why wouldn't I want to have peak performance all the time? And so then we could define, like, what are the circumstances that takes me out of peak performance? And if that defines the state of mind I'm in when I have peak performance, then we can also take a look at what, sorry, Kylan's pushing a truck. I think the truck just broke down.
Does he need a hand?
No, he just pushed it. I got quite the view here.
You are not in the zone.
So again, contrary to what a lot of experts would say, other experts would say, I do believe you can create the zone whenever you want. I believe that it's not elusive. It's not something that's just fluky. It is something that you can practice and you can learn, and therefore you can experience more and more and more often, and you can also experience it at will. And then, again, as I was saying, if you could experience it whenever you wanted and you knew that that's your ideal state of mind for optimal performance, then why just hold it off for certain things? Why not try to experience as much as you can in whatever you're engaged in? So if being able to have dinner with somebody where everything disappears around you because you're so immersed in that conversation, that wouldn't be a bad thing, right? If that's what you're supposed to be doing. Right? If you're taking care of a kid and you're totally immersed in that child, that everything disappears around you, and that child is getting your undivided attention, then that's not a bad thing. Like, that's better than being a parent that's on their cell phone and brushing their kid's hair or watching something on TV and not really playing with the kid or whatever. So it's our optimal state. It's our optimal state for relationships. It's our optimal state for work. It's the optimal state for art and sport and like whatever else. I mean, it's the optimal state for intimacy also. I mean, not to get all weird, but it's true. Like, I've helped guys with male impotence problems, like legit, in my office.
Do you want to clarify that?
Yeah. Not being able to get aroused or stay aroused in a certain region of their body. And it absolutely went back to the same thing, like 100% of the time. It absolutely went back to exactly what I'm teaching to athletes. So, all right, let's say somebody has a date and they're, been dating this person for a while or whatever, and they believe in their mind that they're probably going to be intimate on that Friday. And they don't, does she really like me? Am I good enough? Am I going to be able to perform well? Like, all these different things can go through a person's mind, and so they're getting like performance anxiety ahead of time. They're setting the stage for anxiety before they even get there, which is absolutely no different than the same thing as, getting ready for a competition. And so then in the moment they can start to have all those other kind of thoughts also, or just having a wandering mind, which again, in sport is a problem. If you're thinking about what you're having for dinner instead of totally present with the target, then you're gonna have problems breaking the target. If you're thinking of something else altogether when you're attempting to be intimate, then you're not going to be in that moment, and there's going to be problems, right? So it's the answer for everything. So to be your best as a human being means being in the zone state. So then we can go, okay, and that's just what we happen to call it. It's only really athletes and musicians that call it that. So if you can create it all the time, anytime you want, you can get better and better at it. You can experience it a majority of your day instead of parts of it. You wouldn't want to just do that for sport or whatever else. You would want to practice it and all these other things. And if we can dissect it and say, well, here's how it's explained by thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and I know for a fact that I can teach you how to do each of those elements, then there's like, that makes total sense, right? That you can be in the zone whenever you want, and that those other people are wrong. And so part of what makes them right is that their attempt to try to teach or help somebody be in the zone comes from trying harder. It comes from trying to be in the zone, which is like an oxymoron kind of thing. So that's my belief as to why these other experts have had no luck, and how they would come to the conclusion that you can't create the zone because they don't know how. And so they're coming at it from the wrong angle, and they're coming at it from trying to make it happen when it's a letting go. And the letting go is not easy, right? Because that's like a day-to-day thing. Like, how can you let go of worry when you're worrying about something? How can you let go of insecurities when you've got insecurities? How do you let go of anger when you have mood swings? Like, it's a tall order. So it's not like this is easy. And if somebody doesn't have the kind of experience that I have in helping people, then they really wouldn't know how to help somebody get rid of fear, doubts, insecurity, second guessing, overthinking, anger, resentment, frustrations, like all those human things that are, as we talked about last week, that are all fear-based. It's not common knowledge, and nobody's teaching or helping people to eliminate those things, which all of those things are what keep you out of the zone. So for me, instead of helping people to try harder to get in the zone, you gotta practice the techniques of all the puzzle pieces. But I also see it like a garden. So you've got flowers and plants that you might want to keep, and you're going to fertilize and water them, and then you've got others that are like weeds, right? So you would want to water and fertilize the flowers, which I would see then as the more positive thoughts in your mind, the more love-based kind of thoughts. And you would want to weed out the problematic kinds of thoughts and perceptions, and those would be the fear-based. So the fear-based thoughts are, worry and doubt and second guessing and overthinking and regret and anger and frustration and like all those kinds of negative thoughts that then lead to negative feelings and emotions. So you actually have to pluck those things away, and then what you're actually left with is a natural state that we're all capable of, which then circles back to the zone again. So there's this ability that every human being has to live in peace. Some say to live heaven on earth, or to have peace of mind, or to have serenity, or to have, acceptance maybe. Like, there's a state of being that every human's capable of, but we are our own worst enemy. We tend to get in our own way. So everybody's capable of having peace of mind, but if you have habits, patterns of worrying, then you've just stolen your peace of mind, right? And like nobody else did that. Not even the circumstances around you did it. It's how you are in a habit of processing information. So that's a really long answer to your question, but to me the zone is our optimal state. Every human being is capable of it, and it's our natural state. And we can learn every day to be closer and closer to that.
Real quick, what was the acronym you used for fear? You used it in our meeting last week, and it's in your videos too.
Mm-hmm. It is false evidence appearing real. And you'll see as you move forward in my course that there's lessons in the future about fight or flight and fear and what it does to the body. And again, having looked and seen a lot of other experts' information, what I feel I'm doing different, and I'm sure there's others out there that are doing it too, but it's not the norm. And that is most professionals in the medical field and therapy field, and even in similar work that I'm doing, would say that there are certain stressors in life, right? Like, and there's a top 10 top stressors, right? So if you get a divorce, if you lose your job, if you have a death of a loved one, if you move from one place to another, like there's certain things that are considered like these are legit, right? If you have one or more of these that happen to you within a 12-month period, then you should talk to your doctor, or you should talk to a therapist, or you should look at medication or whatever. Like it is okay if you are stressed out, if you've had 1 or 2 or 3 of these things happen. And again, like that's common. Like most professionals are going to tell you like that, and they're going to empathize with you, right? They're going to say, oh my gosh, you've had a horrible year. I'm going to say it's your perception of those things that are going to cause you suffering or not. So you could change jobs and you can decide it was the best thing that's ever happened. Or you can decide, I don't really know where this path's going to lead me because I don't know, but I'm hopeful and I'm curious. Or you could say, when I stop and think about it, every time something that I thought was awful that happened in my life ended up being something that was super awesome. And I didn't know it at the time. And I cried my eyes out for day after day after day, only to find out it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And if you stop long enough and you reflect on your life, you will see that that's the case, like 100% of the time. So when people stop and they go, well, you know what, I just don't know. So if I don't know, wouldn't it be better? And not only if I don't know, but if past evidence shows me that really cool things come all the time when I least expect them, especially out of some of the things that I thought were the worst, then it's better to either just stay in not knowing or go into hope and think something cool is about to come around the corner. But instead, again, as I started out this whole little lecture, we tend to go to the negative, right? So like divorce is awful and losing this job is awful and the weather is awful and like all this stuff, and we end up making ourselves miserable because when you're having those kinds of thoughts, you're angry or you're stressed or you're resentful or you're worried or you're affecting your blood pressure, you're affecting your sleep, you're affecting all your chemical levels, your hormone levels, everything. So let me finish. So what was your question again?
How long it takes for someone to get in the zone?
Was it how long?
It was
Devin.
oh,
Oh, mine was about the acronym.
Oh, the acronym. Yeah.
Fear.
So.
Which you answered.
well,
Thank you.
sorry, Devin.
No.
So false evidence appearing real, I like that because it does pull back to that's my perception that sucks is the false. It's not, it's false evidence. I have no idea what tomorrow's going to bring me or next year, next 5 years or whatever, but I'm believing whatever fear-based thinking I'm having this, and I'm seeing as false evidence, and it's appearing real to me, and that's why I'm having a reaction to it. If you look at fight or flight, so every human, every animal, every being has a natural instinct to flee or fight. If they're put in a situation that's threatening to their life. So again, this is more fear stuff. So we have an instinct within us that is fear-related that causes us to fight or flee. And that is for survival purposes. So that's the only fear that we should ever really believe, if you want to call it that. But it's instinctual and it just happens. So it's truly, I don't know, if you step out into traffic and you realize there's a car that almost hit you and you like go into fear, that's legit, right?
You don't want to go, that's false information.
If you see a rattlesnake and it's within a few feet of you and you like have fear and you fight or you flee, that's legit. Those are literally the only time that you should be having the fight or flight response, that you should be going into that level of adrenaline and fear and everything else. The problem with our world right now and our society is that we are triggering fight or flight based on false information. So we're putting our bodies into a stress state, more like 85 to 90% of our life and our day, based on stories that we're having in our head. So the fight or flight mode is intended for short periods of time when your life depended on it. But what's happened is our conscious minds have got to the place where they create these stories and we perceive them as real. And they're fear-based. They're not little lovey stories. They're all negative, fear-based, little cruddy stories. And we believe them to be real. We're not stopping to question them until now, right? Until now that you're going through this training, you're like, I should start questioning my own thoughts. You know, whoever thinks to question their own thoughts, they just think, well, this is what I'm thinking, and I'm right, dang it. And, you know, you throw in ego, and the ego's got you thinking, you got it right. I've analyzed this situation. I have a perception of what's going on, or what occurred, or what's about to occur, or whatever. You go into fear about it, which is at the base of anger, worry, doubt, insecurity, second guessing, rage, frustration, regret, right? And so all of those emotions and all of those kinds of thoughts are fear-based, and they're based on false evidence. And so unfortunately, we're triggering that fight or flight, and it's tearing down our immune system. It's tearing down our digestive system. If you think of an animal that goes into fight or flight for survival, it's not in procreation mode, right? I just think of the jungle, right? So if you've got an animal running for its life, part of what happens is the blood actually flows to the extremities. The blood flows to the extremities. It flows to the areas of the body that are necessary for fight or flight. There's a whole bunch of other things that happen too, but it's all related to what does this being need to survive right now. And it doesn't need to procreate in that moment, and it doesn't need to digest food in that moment, and it doesn't need to like make sure the immunity is well, and they're fighting off, you know, germs in the body. So all those things, all the energy of the body actually goes towards, like I said, what's needed for fight or flight. And so it ends up causing problems with reproduction, ends up causing problems with digestion, with processing, with eating, with processing waste, with, what else is there? With the immune system. I feel like I'm missing one. But that's what ends up happening. So there ends up being, you have a weaker body, and you end up having problems in some of the most important areas of your life. And if you look at inflammation, we have an increase in digestive processing of food problems. We're having an increase in reproduction problems. We're having an increase in immunity problems. And that's my belief. It's this attack. It's among other things, but it's this attack. It's in being in a constant state of basically fight or flight.
I think we're fed it from all extremities as well. We're conditioned with the news, with looking at our phones, with listening to people talk about what's going on in their lives. That even if you're in your own place of thought, you can't help but find out that 50 people died in Christchurch. I don't watch the news, but that's still filtered into my world. And you have an emotional reaction to it, even if you don't want to. And
You're
that
absolutely right.
just starts tearing things away, because not least you've no control over what's happening. It's all out there happening.
Yes, definitely. You know, there's also an increase in people believing they have ADD and ADHD like that. I hear about it all the time. Practically every human I know believes they have ADD or ADHD. And the thing is that, again, very similar to what you were just saying, there's a bombardment of information right now. So if you just rewind like 100 years, somebody lived on a farm in Kentucky, they're like playing fetch with the dog. They might be working in the field or something. You know, they don't necessarily know what's happening in the next town over, and they surely don't know what's happening on the other side of the planet. You know, unless they happen to watch the news that night, they might have got a tiny, tiny little glimpse of what was going on. But now it's like, it's not only all this information that's being processed or passed around, but you remember it's fear-based, 90% of it, right? So it's not just happening here, it's happening over the seas, it's happening on the other side of the planet. People are in fear-based thinking a majority of the time. So what they're sharing is, you're not gonna believe what just happened to me. and this frickin' sucks, and what about this, and did you see this, and they're pissed off at this, and they're frustrated about that, and like that's what they're sharing on this social media, or that's what they're sharing when they call you. And but it's also just, to me, it's like the bombardment of, it reminds me of if you had like 10 neon signs around you. So again, if you're working in the fields in Kentucky or something, you don't have 10 neon signs flashing at you. So, which would absolutely capture your attention, right? So if you can focus and be more present, you know, I don't know, picking green beans in the field, if you don't have 5 or 10 neon signs flashing. But when you've got these things flashing, then of course you're gonna have attention deficit issues. You're gonna go, whoa, look at that one, what about that one, what about that one? I got this, and my emails are tinging, and my phone's ringing, and my text is coming in, and you know, so-and-so's next to me, and she's got all the same stuff happening, and then so-and-so's over here, and they're complaining about, I don't know, whatever else. Like, it's a bombardment of information, which is the opposite, again, like from the zone state, how we describe the zone, like a quiet mind, peaceful mind. Everything disappears around you. It's just you and whoever or whatever. Yes?
I got a question for you. It was my understanding that the brain is genetically predisposed to think negative thoughts over positive thoughts.
Mm.
Now, you're going to be an expert in that more than I am, but that was just data that I read in the past. So we have a tendency to process negative thoughts better than positive thoughts. So when you said the natural state is being in the zone, and that the fear and flight may be appropriate at time, but it's exaggerated and it's not, how do you fight if that is true?
Yeah.
That the brain is more predisposed to remember negative than it is positive, and that's supposed to be for survival reasons.
Mm.
Are we then trying to override something that's actually a natural thing?
I personally would say we're not predisposed from that. If you're saying from birth, like you're
Right,
saying
absolutely.
when you come out of the womb, you're predisposed to
Right.
negative. Now, I would say though, that, and I do believe in this, that whatever the baby is exposed to while in the womb definitely is setting a stage for what that
No
baby
question.
needs to survive in, right? So if the baby in the womb, and there's a domestic violent situation happening in that home, that baby's getting all of those hormones and all those stress hormones, and everything that basically that mama has been using for survival is going into that baby. So when that baby comes out, it's actually, and maybe this is what you're referring to, it is set up to survive in that environment. So there are hormones and there are whatever else put into that baby because it's coming into that particular environment. But I wouldn't say across the board that all babies are predisposed. I would say it has a lot more to do with what's happening when they're in the womb, and so that they're prepared for the environment they're coming into. So then we go, okay, well, but we just said like a gazillion people on the planet are fear-based and negative in their way of thinking. So then we go, okay, well then we probably safely conclude that there is a huge majority of babies that are coming out predisposed to survive in a certain kind of environment. I don't think it has to be that way. It's not, you know, if somebody's, if it's more like, you know, a husband and wife that are practicing meditation, they have a peaceful environment, they're both loving and accepting people, then that baby's going to be predisposed for that condition, not predisposed for fear. That's not an enclosed environment though, right? Because then that baby's going to get out there and it's going to meet the neighbor kids and it's going to go to school and it's going to be around other adults and other people, and you know, so it gets a lot more complicated. So that's the way I would see it. And a lot of times we have everything we need right before us, and I think Tiger Woods is a perfect example of this. You know, he was raised in a Buddhist home, and his mom's a practicing Buddhist who meditates all the time. Like the answer for a majority of his problems was within arm's reach his entire life. But I think it was too familiar, right? So, and I say all that because my feeling watching him over the years is it's a mental issue that he's been experiencing, right? So similar to driving a car or stick shift or riding a bike, once you learn technique and mechanics of something, that doesn't just disappear. It just doesn't. You could not ride a bike for a year or 5 years or 10, and it won't take you long to get back on it and write it again pretty well. And you know, people that are gifted and they have either they're gifted and or they've spent, you know, 10, 20, 30 years practicing a skill set, that's in there, and it does not disappear overnight. So Tiger Woods got into all that issue with his ex-wife, and not only that, I was out there on tour at that time. People were ridiculing him, people were throwing gum at him, people were calling him names, and he went from having literally 200 people following him on any given day while he was golfing to like 5, and they were spitting at him. You know? So it's not just, you know, that his marriage fell apart and he got humiliated and media and he's embarrassed or whatever. Even if he was embarrassed, I mean, at that period of his life he had a pretty big ego. So you know, just being found and everything that came out with it is what affected his game. Trying to recover from that means getting his mind right, you know, building confidence again, getting out of fear, all the things that were necessary to go if we just simplified it from fear back into love. So that's an example of, you know, someone who grew up in an environment where there was, at least on his mom's side, you know, and I don't know because I wasn't there, so I can only assume she's a practicing Buddhist who meditate all the time and practice the principles and appears to be pretty good at it from what I've seen. So, you know, it kind of goes back to fight or flight, right? I mean, I didn't mean that. Nurture versus nature.
But Tiger Woods was his father present as well? Is that right?
Yes, his dad was a big part of his learning golf and practicing all the time.
Okay, so
Her father was very driven, made him go out there and
okay,
worked him hard, kind of thing.
which may be more directly where his ego came from and his.
Well, the ego, every human has ego. We talk about that in the first course too, right? So every human has ego. To me, it's part of the human condition. I don't believe that we have ego when we pass. I believe in spirit. I believe that we are spirit having a physical experience, and part of that physical experience is having ego. So ego, and the way it shows up in all of us is like, as an example, you know, I was driving to the island, so I'm supposed to be at a meeting at 11:30 and there's traffic, backed up. If I'm getting upset about that, it's because that shouldn't be happening to me. And the way the ego thinks of things, it thinks it's like I'm the only one on this planet. And so if I'm going to go from point A to point B, then it's going to happen in this period of time because it's only me, right? That's kind of, I mean, it doesn't, you don't have those kind of thoughts. It's just there. You just have this, like, it's me, right? And so then when it's me comes across all these other cars and it's holding me back from my plan for my day, if I get upset about that, then it's ego. So we all have that. If you get cut off in traffic and you get road rage, it's ego. If you, I don't know. If you think, you know, well, I walked in a room and everybody, they must be talking about me, that's ego. You know, so the ego is there, it's running the show more often than we realize until we start paying attention to it. So I like for people to go into like a third person perspective where they observe themselves. They observe their ego, they observe their patterns, they observe their perceptions. And as I state in the first course, ego ultimately needs to be tamed down, and conscious mind needs to be trained, and the subconscious mind needs to be trusted. And this is just my belief, and you know, I do a lot of my own personal research and everything. I don't believe that we will 100% eliminate the ego while we're in human form. It's part of being here. But people that are, when you hear things, people talk about being enlightened, they're basically overcoming the ego. They're becoming more present. They're learning to live in the zone more and more. They're coming more from love than they are from fear. That's what enlightened is. It's a path that people head down that are more of spiritual practices or whatever. But the ego, but we all have ego. So in my observation, I think that's part of the reason that I did work for so long with the golfers, because ego was one of the hardest things for me to work with. I mean, I'm used to it from the normal folk. But what I observed and noticed being out there is that ego can get fed. And you feed it steak dinners. When people are telling you you're amazing all the time and they're worshiping you and they're trying to, everywhere you turn they want your autograph, and you're making gazillions of dollars for hitting a ball instead of saving the planet from cancer or something. There's like these things that are feeding into it, and ultimately that each person has an ability and that most of them don't know about to process that information however they can. So if you unknowingly are processing that information, then it's very likely that the ego is going to get involved, and the ego is going to think it's all about me and everything revolves around my life and my world, and all these people are here to see me, and I'm amazing, and my face is on a billboard, and I'm worshipped everywhere I go, and so having seen it at such a large capacity in such a really obvious way taught me a lot about it. And if somebody's mindful, they can be in those kind of environments and still have humility, but it takes being mindful, just like it would for anybody else. It takes being mindful to go, whoa, I was totally in ego just now. Like driving over this bridge and going to this meeting, it's just, this isn't all about me, right? I mean, who knows, there's an accident up there. Who knows, like somebody's in pain right now, somebody's suffering, somebody's having problems, somebody's, like, who knows? And for me to get angry or upset, and it's the same thing with road rage, like I have no earthly idea why that person just cut me off. So if I can pause and be mindful instead of arrogant about it, I could go, okay, so what if that was me rushing down the road, because it has been before. Maybe I'm rushing to a loved one, maybe my wife's in the hospital, maybe she just had a miscarriage, maybe I just got the worst news and I have to go do whatever. Like, we have no earthly idea what that other human being is experiencing, but if we capture it and let our ego get a hold of it, then it's all about me, and that person's an ass, and they should have never done that to me. And then it's just a matter of how long that festers in your own life. Is it going to affect you for 30 seconds or 1 minute or 5 minutes or in half an hour or an hour or whatever? And it's, again, this false, because you don't know what's happening in that other car or why the traffic's on that bridge or whatever else. You have no earthly idea. So ultimately, you go back to some of the things on the zone list. Let me enjoy this moment. Let me not listen to my analytical, fear-based thoughts and all that analyzing and wondering and predicting what's happening and analyzing the situation and thinking I'm right, and then getting frustrated and angry and resentful about it. Like, you go, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to roll down my windows and turn on the music and look at the birds flying by and enjoy the breeze and just get back into what's real. So the false evidence appearing real is what would have caused anxiety or whatever. Getting back into a quiet mind, peaceful mind, present, get absorbed into the real life moment, enjoy it. Oh, that was another thing. That was one of the ones I left out. A feeling of euphoria and pure joy is another thing when you're in the zone. And that's again something you're capable of. So you're capable of it even when you're sitting in traffic. It definitely, there are challenges, and that's one of the challenges, right? So there's challenges with traffic, there's challenges with loved ones that are showing their butt, there's challenges with with work, and there's challenges with home and with kids and in-laws and family, and these are all, to me, no different than there's traffic going over the bridge, right? So I can choose to look at that however I want. I can think this sucks and life sucks and like whatever else, or I can go, got it. Here's the data, right? Here's the data. The data is there's cars that going over this bridge. There's likely something happening. I don't know what it is. Let me process that information, and then let me make a decision on how I'm going to be in this moment. And the choice, the best choice, is to then come to decide to go into love. So it's like love of self, love of others, love of life, love of the circumstance. That reminds me of another thing I learned working with clients is a lot of the things that I studied and trained on early on were saying, you know, if you want whatever it is, and visualize it, and it will come to you. Like you can manifest things, and there was an element of that in my training related to weight loss. And when I went through the training for hypnotherapy to help people with weight loss, it was, you know, parts of it were things like have them visualize themselves thin. Have them, you know, every morning when they look in the mirror say, you know, I'm thin, trim, and healthy. Instead of I'm fat and I suck and I'm ugly and I'm this and that, you know, and put a picture of themselves thin on the refrigerator and like all these things. And for the first several years of my practice, I thought, that makes sense, right? Because it's kind of similar to everything I just said. Like, you shouldn't sit there and say, I'm ugly and I'm fat and I suck and I'm this and I'm that. You know, I'm not saying it's not easy to do that either, but telling them to do the opposite, which was, you know, look in the mirror and say, I'm thin and I'm trim and I'm healthy. And I did that for several years. And for a while there, it didn't feel right. Like there was just a part of my gut that was like, this is weird. Like, how do you tell somebody that's 300 pounds overweight that when they look in the mirror, they should say, I'm slim, trim, and healthy? But I did it because that was my training. I did it for several years. And, you know, and I got the funny looks from customers and clients and all that. And eventually I was like, you know what? That's not what it is. It's not what it is. And I see now, and this applies to a lot of different things in life, it can't always be about, you know, one day I'll be happy. One day when I have, you know, a certain car, I'll be happy. One day when I have the house on the beach, I'll be happy. One day when, I'm making, you know, such and such amount of money, I'll be happy. One day when I, whatever, graduate with a certain degree, I'll be happy. Like one day. It can't always be that this is what it's all about, right? And you can't come back here and say, well, I'm going to imagine having the house on the beach and my life is wonderful. I know it's really important to know what direction you want to go in. It's extremely important for a lot of reasons, and a lot that I talked about last week. You have to have the clarity, but you've got to come back here and be happy. You can't be here and be, this sucks compared to that, because that's all going back to the same problem again. So you're putting yourself in a miserable state here if there's a belief that it'll be better then. And that's not the optimal state to create from. So you have to love yourself now. You have to love your life now. You have to love where you're at now. At the same time, having clarity as to, well, this is good, but wouldn't it also be cool if? Like more like that instead of, well, one day, you know, and then creating all these visions and ideas of what could be great out here. So when I saw that with the weight loss clients, that was a big, and that was years of doing it the other way. And then I went, you know what? I changed it to every day. Every day I'm slimmer, trimmer, and healthier. Each day, because each day I'm a new person, and each day I'm applying new things, and each day I'm learning something new from like a mental trainer or whatever new skill they're implementing or whatever. So every day I'm slimmer and trimmer and healthier. and I love my life now, and I love where it's going. And that's a much more powerful place to like create from, and then also like fits in with like enjoy the journey rather than just the, you know, look at the destination. It's like enjoying the drive, not just when we get there. You know, if you're going on vacation, it's not just when I get there, life's gonna be good. Like every moment of that journey is part of the experience, and you have a choice in every moment. And a lot of people, you know, they're like, oh, I gotta get there, we're not making very many stops. You know, then they get frustrated if somebody has to stop and go to the bathroom all the time, or if somebody's tired or they need breaks or whatever. And because in their brain, it's about the destination versus let's enjoy this journey. And let's just be in love. Let's just enjoy it. Let's check out the view. Let's laugh. Let's talk. Let's have good conversations. Let's stop as many times as I need to, because that's what I need to do. You know, like, that's really different than just, well, we got to get there, because there is where the goodness is. You know, so it's all the same thing. About other questions? Nothing?
Just the beginning of that, obviously, was that the enjoy the journey, not the destination?
Yes.
Is that what we were discussing?
Yes.
Okay.
You want me to repeat it for you?
No, I have to go mail packages
Okay.
and possibly get over the bridge.
Actually, could you repeat that the ego should be tamed, the conscious mind should be quieted, and the subconscious mind should be...
Yeah. It is in the first 101. So I'm saying that because I might have the two words confused.
Okay.
So definitely subconscious is trusted. Ego tamed, and conscious mind trained.
Oh, trained. I
Yeah,
put
that's
quieted. Okay.
Trained.
That's to pause and be mindful. I had that on the wrong thing. Tame the ego.
Tame the ego. Tame down the ego. You don't want to feed it steak dinners.
I'm working on my road rage right now.
Any other questions? All right, so I'll just go over. That hurts. All right, so you have, this is the unconscious. That's the subconscious. That's the conscious. There's a lot of, again, there's gazillions of experts out there, right? Some people I've noticed actually switch some of these words. So what I might call the subconscious or the unconscious, they, like if I call it subconscious, they might call it unconscious. Or if I call it unconscious, they might call it the subconscious. I've even, and this is rare, had people totally switch the conscious and the subconscious. And I'm listening to what they're explaining, I'm like, wow, that's like the total opposite. And then there's some really funny things too with language, like to be more mindful, some people would say it's to be more conscious, which is weird because we kind of want less of this guy. we want to quiet the conscious mind. We also want it to be like sitting and healing. So we want it present. And that's probably why they say mindful is the same as being conscious. Or conscientious, right? If you think of the word conscientious, that means to be mindful, to pay attention to what you're doing, to be engaged in whatever you're doing. So the unconscious is responsible for your automatic functions, your eyes blinking, and your breathing, your heart beating, and whatever else. So I don't do anything related to the unconscious. The subconscious, this is the most powerful part of your mind, but until you start learning about it, you don't even really realize it. because we've been spending most of the time in the conscious. So until we start to be a bit more mindful, until we start to be more conscientious, we think that the conscious is where it's at. This is why when you guys listen to the 20-minute audio, there's a lot of people that think, well, is it okay that I didn't hear the whole thing? Or is it okay that I don't really remember what you were saying? Or is it okay if I stopped paying attention to it? And I think it's not, because on a day-to-day basis, they think if you're going to learn something, you got to listen to every word. You got to hang on every word. You've got to pay attention to every single word. And so when they go to do something like hypnosis, they're all confused because they're so used to doing things from this conscious level that they don't know, and they don't know anything about the subconscious, so they surely don't know how to trust it. So they think they're not doing it right. So in the 20-minute audio, I actually, the whole beginning part of it is an induction. Actually, the whole thing's an induction. I just started using it for other purposes. But you'll see that I tell you to focus on your breath, focus on the hairs in your nose, focus on the warmth of your breath as it moves through your throat, focus on, or the coolness of it, and then maybe the warmth when you exhale. Like there's all these things that you can focus on. And so I'm telling you in those moments to bring your conscious mind in. You know, don't let it think of something else. Don't let it think of your to-do list or what's for dinner or who you're supposed to call or whatever. You say, nope, conscious mind, you're going to come in here right now and you're going to focus on the little hairs in my nose. And you bring your conscious mind to that point. And then it'll wander off because that's part of one of the qualities of the conscious mind. First of all, it can only focus on one thing at a time. So it's going to focus on the little hairs in your nose, or it's going to wander off and it's going to think about your to-do list. It's just one or the other. And it gets bored really easy. So it's interested in something that's new and exciting, and it's like the shiny penny kind of concept. So it's going to be interested in something new and exciting. So new is pay attention to the nose hairs, or notice how cold the air is when you breathe it in, and then how warm it is when you exhale. Right? That's new and exciting, like a shiny penny. So it's going to be focused on that until it gets a little bit of repetition, and then that's old news and it's boring. It's kind of like a kid throwing the penny. It was cool at first, and then they're over it. And that's how the conscious mind is. So if it's new and exciting, it's going to pay attention. As soon as it gets repetitive, mundane, old in any way, it wanders off. And that's what's happening when you're listening to that audio. So I'm playing with the conscious mind. I'm like, bring it in, and then I give it something super boring, and I know it's going to wander off again. And then I go, now if your mind's wandered, now bring it in. And I might tell you to relax your forehead, relax your eyebrows, relax your cheeks, and that takes a moment, because you go, wait, what does that feel like? And then you go in and you try to relax your cheeks, and then I go, relax your jaw, and then you go, whoa, I didn't even know that it was tight, but now it feels so much better. So that's what's happening, and it reminds me of like a cat and mouse game, and that's what I'm playing with your conscious mind. I'm like, I'm going to reel it into something new and exciting, and then I'm going to bore it so it wanders off, and I have it come back in again. And after a few times of playing that game, what tends to happen is the conscious mind dissipates. That's just my word for what happens. It doesn't really, but that's what it reminds me of. It kind of goes, and it's still there. It's still aware. That's why it's not asleep. Like sleep is totally different than being in the hypnosis that you're doing. So sleep, you're not aware at all consciously. But between awake and asleep, when you're in that hypnosis, you are you have awareness, right? So that's part of the induction, is to pull it in, knowing it will only focus on one thing at a time. I also know it's going to get bored, so it's going to wander off. And I also know it's only going to play that game so many times before it just gives up. It like throws in the towel. So So if you look at it, this is beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Beta is lots of activity. Your conscious mind is like analyzing, wondering, worrying, fretting, overthinking, projecting into the future, thinking about the past, analyzing the moment. There's a ton of activity here. This is what's happening when you're trying to go to sleep at night and you can't, because you keep thinking about your day and your to-do list and the what ifs and whatever else. Ego is hangs out here in the conscious mind. So when the conscious mind's in beta, better believe the ego is a part of all that. Fear-based thinking hangs out in the conscious mind. So unless you change it, there's going to be a lot of fear happening in here also, which is all the worrying that's keeping up at night, all the fretting, or all the anger, or all the regret, or whatever else. So all that stuff, this is what's keeping you up at night. This is our normal functioning in a day-to-day moment. At times through the day, you may pop down in here a little bit. That's when you're doing what we call like highway hypnosis. So you've got less conscious activity. It's not necessarily deliberate, it just happens every once in a while. So studies now in the last like five years are proving that your mind's in an alpha and even sometimes theta state when you're in the zone. And these are just words, okay? Like these are just words to try to describe situations. So if you think of what I described to you as the zone earlier, one of the things was a quiet conscious mind, right? Well, yeah, that's what happens when you go down here towards delta. So delta is sleep, REM, and truly what you would identify as sleep. Now there isn't a line. I really shouldn't have drawn that. There's all varying degrees. So this is less and less conscious level activity. When doctors or whatever tell you, they're going to say this is measured on an ECG or EKG, and they're going to say this is brain wave activity. That's another thing that I've come to believe a little bit more different. This is measuring conscious mind activity. My experience is the subconscious is always there. Doesn't even matter if you're in a coma. The subconscious is there. Doesn't matter if you're asleep. The subconscious mind is aware. It doesn't matter if you're here, here, or here, or here. The subconscious mind is always aware. It is on guard. That's why if you're sleeping and there's strange noises happening or something, or maybe someone's staring at you when you're in bed, it's your subconscious that's going to pick up on that. What am I going to say about that? It's your subconscious that's aware right now if your legs fall asleep because you're sitting in a certain way. It's not your conscious mind. Your conscious mind's not going, well, let me check in on my legs right now. Let me check in on my tongue to see if it's dehydrated. It's your subconscious that's aware of everything happening using every cell in your body at all times. So consciously, you might be thinking of shooting or a conversation you had with somebody earlier, but subconsciously, this amazing part of your mind is like paying attention using every cell in your body. It's the one that's going to pick up on the smell of smoke or kerosene or something like that when you're engrossed in a conversation. So subconscious is always aware, always present. Sorry, I just had another thought. Always present, it's like omnipresent, right? I won't go there right now. So ego, fear, bait. This is all in lots of activity. So let's just go with the example of falling asleep. So you want to get here to go to sleep at night. You have to pass through what's called alpha. It's nothing other than less brainwave activity. But instead of brainwave, we're gonna say less conscious mind activity, conscious part of your mind. We're gonna say theta's even less, and we're gonna say delta's even less. I don't have the numbers memorized, but this is like a very low megahertz. This is the next level up, that's the next level, and this is a high level of megahertz. So, if you're starting to fall asleep, you dip here. If you remember that you left the laundry in the dryer, you came back up here for a moment. If you're like, screw it, I'm going to sleep anyways, you come back down here. If you go, oh my God, I was supposed to call so-and-so, you came back up here. The nights you go to bed easily, you don't have this, right? You just close your eyes, you start to relax, and you just go down. Some people relax and fall asleep within a few minutes. Some people, it takes 15, 20 minutes. The ones that keep going like that, they either never go to sleep or it takes them a really long time. Same thing happens when you wake up in the middle of the night. So you either can wake up and turn over or go to the bathroom and go back to bed really easily, or you can wake up, so here's sleep, you're sleeping, and then you wake up, you might hover here a little bit, and then you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is happening in my life, and so sucks, and this sucks, and that sucks, and what about this, and what about that, and next thing you know, you're here. And then you can't get back to sleep. So the audio helps you. Well, wait, let me say. Alpha theta is hypnosis. And again, these are just words, right? So it's just words for this state of mind. Meditation. What other words? Any other weird ones out there right now?
No, I think those are the two.
I think that's it. I'm sure that people are coming up with more. When I decided to be a hypnotist and market myself as a hypnotist, I was encouraged to use different words because not everybody understood hypnosis, and some people were against it, and some people had misconceptions about it. So medical relaxation was terms flying around, which would be the same. So medical relaxation, therapeutic relaxation was some other terms that were flying around. I feel like there's another one. Anyways, I've been in really good debates with meditative people who think meditation's where it's at, and hypnosis is like the stepchild. This can't be the same because meditation are these spiritual, beautiful yogi people, So they're all blissful and into yoga and whatever else, and they think meditation is this wonderful thing that they do, and hypnosis is not the same thing. Again, another thing I disagree with, because there's one road from here to there. If you're talking about measuring megahertz of brainwave activity, there's one road. There's not a bunch. There's one road. So you're either in beta, you're in alpha, you're theta, or in delta, or you're in some combination somewhere in between here. Hypnosis, high levels of hypnosis are, let's say, more alert versus less, versus more relaxed. So high levels of hypnosis is called light somnambulism. So if you're come in here somewhere, we're going to say you're in light somnambulism. Again, it's just words. Bless you.
Thank you.
If you're in here, hypnosis is called deep somnambulism. I imagine this would be medium. And then there's something called the coma state of hypnosis, which is not the medical coma. This is just the coma state of hypnosis. In that state, a person hears you because you're not asleep. So conscious mind has a level of awareness. Subconscious is paying attention to everything anyways. They will actually hear me, but they're in such a state of bliss, which is, remember, one of those words of the zone. They're in such a level of peace and euphoria peace of mind, quiet, and then all these great hormones and juices and everything in their body, and they're beyond their mind at that point. They don't really want to come out. They won't stay there forever. But I've had it happen a few times. It's called the coma state. The only way to get them out is to tell them, you know, whatever, I'm closing shop. I'm leaving. And as a hypnotherapist, doing this for, you know, as long as I have, I can tell the difference between sleep and that also. So whether they're asleep, whether they're in coma, whether in theta and alpha, I can tell just looking at them at this point, and how they're interacting or not interacting or whatever. So sleep to me even looks different than really deep somnambulism. Okay, so if that's the terms for hypnosis, there's no terms for meditation other than light meditation and deep. And studies are showing that top athletes, when they're in their peak performance and making their best shots, the brainwave activity, conscious mind brainwave activity is, most of them are saying alpha. But again, there's like plays on words happening. I'm seeing a few that are saying theta. From my experience, because I work so much with athletes, I would actually say it's probably more like here is the zone. It's not close down there to the coma state. So I'm just gonna erase that, even though other people are saying it. You don't have to have your eyes closed to be in these states. Right? If we said highway hypnosis, so okay, we said hypnosis is here, highway hypnosis, something really repetitive, something really mundane. I already said the conscious mind, when it goes to repetitive and mundane, it just like kind of dissipates a little bit, and all of a sudden you're at your destination, which is one of the things we started off talking about. So highway hypnosis, your eyes are open. You just down here in the alpha, instead of thinking of a trillion different things and worrying and regretting and whatever else, your conscious mind's pretty quiet. You're pretty present and enjoying the ride on some level. You don't have to be like, whoa, look at that tree and look at those birds, but you're engaged in what you're doing. All of a sudden you get there. There's other cool things that happen here. And let's see. This is part of more of what I've been learning and observing and studying in like the last 5 to 10 years. When you quiet this stinker here, not only do you have peak performance, but you can hear. You can hear your inner voice. You can hear your, if you want to call it, your subconscious guidance. And what I really like to call it is like maybe universal consciousness. Or if you want to say listening to God. Or if you want to say listening to my higher self. Or if you want to say listening to my guardian angel. Now, I don't believe I'll know who's talking to you till I'm dead. I just know it's happening. So, and it might be all of them, all at different times. I have no earthly idea. So, when you quiet all this chatter, you not only can hear, which is, so that's saying down here, right? This is why a lot of people meditate. So, and a lot of people in prayer. So when you're praying, you're not like thinking of all sorts of crazy things and worrying and fretting and thinking about dinner, right? Prayer and meditation are very similar. So you get yourself in a seated or kneeling position. You quiet your mind. You start to focus a lot on one particular thing. That I'm thinking of like when Catholics do the
Communion.
rosary beads, right? And they pray all around. They have a prayer all the way around on each So that's repetitive. Some people, when they meditate, they repeat a mantra over and over and over again. But there's a lot of cool things that happen here. So when you get out of your fear-based thinking and you get out of your ego and you quiet down this chatter, we already said you have peak performance here. Part of the reason that I believe you have peak performance is not only because you've gotten out of your own way. So if you say you're in your own way, you keep causing your own problems, you're your own worst enemy, that's this part. If you quiet that down, you can listen to what I described to you guys last week is everybody know that there's a kind of a voice of an angel or a devil in their head. It's like the saying, you have an angel on your shoulder, or a devil on your shoulder, or whatever. These are just ways that we're trying to explain. So there's a part of me that wants to be in fear, right? That's going to worry about things. That's going to say, that should have never happened. You should totally lash out at that person. And then this other person, the other part of my mind is going to go, it's okay. Good things come from everything, right? It's okay. How's another way that we could look at this, right? So there's fear and there's love. The fear-based thinking tends to be the squeaky wheel. That's the way I see it. I feel like it's the squeaky wheel. It's going to be louder. It's going to be more obnoxious. It's going to be like this, this, and this. The little angel voice, the quieter voice, is less persistent. It's more of a gentle nudge, and it is definitely more loving. It's more guidance. Everybody has free will, and as I said, everybody's got ego. Everybody's got their human experience to have, and so that gentle nudge is going to be gentle, right? It's going to be, why don't you put on your seatbelt? Maybe you should turn left instead of right. Or this is okay, this too shall pass, or whatever. From my experience, learning and paying attention to this, is that we tend to ignore this quiet little sweet voice. And we tend to listen to the squeaky wheel until you learn about it and you start practicing mindfulness. I shouldn't circle that, but it's the taming, it's the training of the conscious mind to be present, mindful, in the moment. Teach the ego, we train it to decrease the fear. So if we're doing all that up here, we're able to tap into our greater self anyways, and also plug in. What's the plug? Plug in to whatever you want to call it. This is a big star. It's the thing. So you can plug into that. And when you plug into this, so first of all, we already knew you're pretty powerful here. This is peak performance zone. You learn to plug in here. You are like, there's no more, you can't be more powerful than that. And so to me, when an athlete says, I didn't even feel like I pulled the trigger, it just happened. They are in this. When an artist is in the zone and making these brilliant pieces of art, they're in this. When Mozart was preparing his pieces, he was in this. When Einstein was creating his theories and all this other, he was in this. And there's a lot of documentation to show that the greatest inventors of all time meditated regularly. Or a lot of them, and you can read about this and watch documentaries, woke up, their sleep, woke up somewhere around 4 o'clock and had the idea. They didn't wake all the way here. They didn't come back to this stinker land, because this is where they were trying to finish or solve the equation the day before. This is where they were trying to invent the light bulb a gazillion times the day before. It's in the middle of the night, totally asleep, waking up a little bit, and then they gotta get up because the information's flowing. That's another thing. Some people call this the flow. The flow. So those are interchangeable right now. The zone is more used related to sports, and the flow is more used in the kind of spirituality. But when you get into either of those, you are at your ideal human condition, mind state, and also tapped in. When you tap in, you can learn to listen and hear that guidance and turn off the fear. So obviously this is really awesome for life, but if you want to be great in whatever sport, like that's just another element of life. It's just what you're doing from whatever, 4 to 6 on that particular day. Does anybody have any questions about any of that?
No, but you can see why it relates to day, not just the sport. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing a job that you love and you're sat and you're actually doing something that you're creating, like Kylan said the other day, he loves doing the traps and being creative about that. That's when the inspiration comes of how to fix things, because he's in that place of allowing something bigger to come in and actually help that process. So the easier it is for you to shut off that conscious mind, that shitty bit of everything thinking, and get into that place, the easier it is for you to actually do what you enjoy, or get out of what you don't enjoy to get to where you want to be.
Yes.
So you can see how the training relates to not just being on the sports field, but it relates into normal life, which relates back to being in the sports field.
Yes.
There's some
Yes.
people who would argue that the beta waves,
Mhm.
and then your alpha and your theta waves, they both need each other in a strong way. Like short-term memory, long-term memory. The feeling is if you're thinking, you're stinking, so you're in your beta wave. So you're really not going to get the whole thing. You're trying to train your subconscious or unconscious or whatever you want to call it, to think in a certain way. But when you talk about measurements and stuff, I think all we're doing is really measuring beta waves. I don't think we're measuring brain activity at all, because there's a lot of people think the alpha and theta, there's billions and billions of activities going on. We're just not measuring it.
Exactly. That's,
So
yes.
You can't use one parameter to measure the brain, or because you're missing it.
I agree, and that's why I add that word. This is conscious level brainwave activity that's being measured, because there are a lot of things that we don't know how to measure right now.
I agree.
And
That doesn't mean they don't exist.
Jimmy and I studied the Dr. Yes, doesn't mean they don't exist, right? And so Dr. Joe Dispenza and a few of the popular people right now have identified that there is gamma.
Yes.
So, and this is another thing that I'm picking apart right now, because a lot of the experts are saying that gamma's here, but this is new. And you access gamma by going to theta. This is
So you
interesting
skip-
from what I just explained though, right? So you go into deep meditation, doorway opens to gamma. That makes no sense to me. If gamma's here, then it means you've got to come back here. That's not what's happening. It's happening down here. So this is super cool. This is what I love about Dr. Joe right now. He's measuring the activity in the body and the brain in gamma. He's got all sorts of data. Now he's still saying it's up there, but when he's got lots of doctors and scientists and everything in these advanced workshops, when they see what happens on the monitors, it looks like the person's having a seizure. So, you know, there's all these different things that they're measuring, right? So it's like, and when they go into what's now being called gamma, it goes like crazy. And they're smiling and their eyes are closed and they're in a deep meditative state. So, I have my own theory.
But I think it's because they're in heart coherence, isn't it? It's the fact that you've got the two things going on. So at the moment, everything in psychology and all of this is measured around the brain. And now scientists are starting to look, and Dr. Joe's going there and saying, yeah, but this is actually bigger. This is about the heart. And when the two are in connection, then you get the gamma, which is why gamma comes below theta, but it's faster than beta.
It is when the coherence happens. Allie started reading Dr. Joe's stuff when she came here. So brain and heart coherence is what they're talking about. I'm going to add one thing in here that they're not talking about. That's this plug-in. So if this is, how about, I like this word, these words, higher power. Let's just stick to that word, words. It's 2 words. Higher power, if I plug in, we've already proven and we've already said that you tap into this when you're meditating in deep relaxation. You can tap into it here too. I mean, you have it all the time. It's present. You're just too cluttered with chatter here to hear it. So by quieting this mind, you can hear and you can connect. So if the doorway's opening here, why do we even have to say that it's conscious level brainwave activity? Why even put it on this one parameter, as you were saying, Bob? Why not just say they just connected to some freaking energy that we can't even explain right now, and it's throwing all of our instruments off the kilter, and that the medical doctors that are sitting there are saying they're having a seizure. Like, that's what the computer's saying, but they're not, because they're sitting there and they're not having a seizure. So they just got a download. They just got tapped in. They just got tapped into greater frequency. And that's what they're, to me, what they're calling gamma. I wouldn't even call it that personally. It's they connected.
It's a download.
Yes, and they are using that word. They are saying download. But this is no doubt the doorway. And it's one of the reasons I meditate for an hour in the morning to get out of all this human stuff, to get beyond ego, to get beyond the physical, and to connect to greater consciousness and the information that's there, the guidance that's there, the just curiosity that I have for what's there, and that level of energy then stays with you. That level of bliss. I've done a lot of studying on like near-death experiences and different things like that. And people that have come back say that it was the most beautiful, loving feeling. There's no words to describe it. It's total love, total bliss. It's like total peace. If you don't have your body and your ego, there's no fear, there's no joint pain, all that's gone, right? And on top of that, there's this, that's another word. Has anybody heard God is love?
Yes.
There's little sticky notes or whatever. So you could say that you're tapping into love at the highest level. So again, people that have come back, if you believe that, in near-death experiences, they say it was beyond blissful. It was the most powerful of loves. The light is just full of love, and I believe we can experience that. And I feel like I do experience it. So you just take that back into your little life. And then you keep taming down that ego, and you keep challenging fear-based thoughts, and you train your conscious mind to be present and in the moment, and you keep sticking into love, and you have less chatter, then you're living here. Every once in a while, my ego takes me here. Every once in a while, I have a lot on my plate, and I come here, but I'm mindful of it, and I come back here super fast. So where people that aren't aware of this information would live here in their waking moments a majority of the time, or they get really angry and it takes them an hour to get over it or whatever, this can be shorter periods of time. Now, speaking of that, I don't want to give the conscious mind a bad rap. It is necessary, it is important. It is the part of the mind that you can focus on the moment. That's not, your subconscious mind is just aware of everything at all times. Your conscious mind, the proper use of it that you'll see in course 101, no, it's part of 201. The proper use of the conscious mind when it is trained is, I've got this project in front of me. Let me decide what parts I need. Let me decide what to do first. Let me analyze it, basically, is what it is. So let me analyze the information and make a plan and a decision of how I want to move forward. It can flip into the past where it goes, well, yesterday I tried blah, 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 blah on that machine and it didn't work. So you have to be able to reflect. You have to be able to look into the past and think of what I did before, or what could I have done different, or what can I learn from that, so then I can apply it to this time, this moment. So it's important to be able to reflect in the past. It's important to be able to analyze information in the moment. It's important to be able to project in the future. You go, okay, well, if I get this done and this done by 4 o'clock, then I can do this at 5 o'clock. And then later tonight I can go do this, this, and this. Or I'd like to have steak for dinner tonight, so I should take it out of the freezer right now. I'd like to go somewhere, whatever, to such and such this weekend, so let me do this, this, and this, so I can go do that. But those would be brief. They're brief moments of, I like to do it in the morning. I have to do it a few times throughout the day where I go, okay, let me look at my schedule for today, which is looking into the future. Let me see what I need to do now to plan or prepare for that. If I'm working on a project, I might, think about, well, what worked before, what didn't work before, and then use that information in that moment. So we do need the conscious mind. It's not a bad guy. It's got bad habits. And in the focus loop lesson, that's where you learn a lot about what the tendencies are. That's 2011. Yeah,